Today, we take a closer look at the Beeching railway cuts, which left a lasting mark on British railway history. These cuts represent a pivotal moment when the British government made sweeping changes to its transportation infrastructure, impacting countless communities, businesses, and individuals. These Beeching cuts fundamentally altered the landscape of the rail network, prompting debates about the role of rail transport in a rapidly changing society. And while some saw the cuts as necessary for financial stability, others viewed them as a tragic loss of heritage, culture, and connectivity. The Beeching railway cuts, named after Dr. Richard Beeching, was a series of significant reforms in the British rail network during the 1960s. Dr. Beeching, a noted economist and engineer, was appointed as the chairman of the British Transport Commission in 1961, with a mandate to streamline and modernize the nation's railways. His recommendations, outlined in the infamous The Reshaping of British Railways report, led to the closure of numerous railway lines, stations, and depots across the country. This drastic restructuring, often referred to as the Beeching Axe, aimed to address the declining financial health of the railway system and bring about greater efficiency. This video delves into the Beeching railway cuts, examining their historical context, implementation, and lasting consequences. It will provide a comprehensive understanding of the Beeching Axe, shedding light on the factors that led to its adoption, the communities it affected, and its enduring legacy in contemporary discussions about rail transport. But before we continue, if you're joining us for the first time, make sure you hit that subscribe button to unlock a treasure trove of incredible videos. And don't keep your thoughts to yourself, drop a comment below and tell us what content you'd like to see next. Dr. Richard Beeching, the central figure behind the Beeching railway cuts, was a prominent British engineer, economist, and businessman. Born in 1913, Beeching had a distinguished career which included positions in both the public and private sectors. Prior to his involvement in British Railways, he worked for Imperial Chemical Industries, ICI, and was known for his business insight. In 1961, Beeching was appointed as the chairman of the British Transport Commission, where he was tasked with overseeing the ailing national railway system. His background in management and economics made him a natural choice for this role, as the British government sought to modernize and rationalize the railway network. After World War II, Britain's railways faced a challenging landscape. The network was extensive but aging, and it was grappling with declining passenger numbers and financial difficulties. The rise of road transport, including the expansion of the motorway network and the popularity of personal automobiles, posed a significant challenge to the railways. Moreover, the rail system was fragmented and inefficient, and it also required substantial government subsidies to stay operational. Several key factors necessitated a comprehensive restructuring of Britain's railways in the post-war era. Financial strain was a significant concern, as the railways were operating at a loss, prompting the government to seek ways to reduce the burden on taxpayers while maintaining essential services. Simultaneously, declining passenger numbers attributed to the increasing popularity of cars affected the railways, particularly rural lines and underutilized stations, making them costly to sustain. The network also suffered from duplicate routes running parallel to each other, which was perceived as an opportunity for cost savings and streamlining. Inefficiencies plagued various aspects of the railway system, from operations and maintenance to management, highlighting the need for a modernization plan to enhance efficiency and reduce costs. Dr. Richard Beeching's appointment as chairman of the British Transport Commission marked the beginning of a significant re-evaluation and restructuring of the British railway system. His subsequent report, The Reshaping of British Railways, aimed to address these challenges head-on, setting in motion the contentious Beeching railway cuts that would transform the nation's railways and leave a lasting legacy. The report was a product of extensive research and analysis, aiming to provide a rational framework for the transformation of Britain's railways. It had far-reaching implications, both in terms of the closures it recommended and the principles it laid out for a more efficient and cost-effective rail system. The Beeching report presented a comprehensive plan with several key recommendations and specific objectives. A central feature of the plan was the closure of thousands of miles of railway lines and hundreds of stations considered unprofitable and underutilized, aimed at reducing operating costs and reallocating resources to more viable routes. Additionally, the report proposed concentrating resources on a smaller number of main lines, with upgrades for speed and efficiency, including electrification and the removal of duplicative lines. Modernization of stations to enhance passenger facilities and operational efficiency was also recommended. Integration with other modes of public transportation, such as road transport, to create a more cohesive national transport network was emphasized. A primary objective was to reduce heavy subsidies, making the railways financially self-sufficient. The report suggested streamlining the railway's management structure to reduce bureaucracy and increase efficiency. The Beeching report generated substantial controversy and opposition primarily due to several key reasons. Firstly, the closure of numerous branch lines and rural stations had a profound impact on local communities, leaving them without access to vital services and transportation options, resulting in protests and campaigns against the closures. Critics also contended that the report underestimated the economic value of certain lines, and the closures were believed to have negative economic consequences for rural areas. Additionally, the closure of historic railway lines and stations was viewed as a loss of cultural and heritage assets, raising concerns about the preservation of Britain's rich railway history. The implementation of the Beeching railway cuts occurred in several phases, beginning shortly after the publication of the Beeching report in 1963 and continuing into the late 1960s. The closure of railway lines and stations was a contentious and emotionally charged process. Thousands of miles of railway lines were shut down and hundreds of stations were closed to passengers. The criteria for closures were primarily based on financial viability and passenger usage. Lines and stations that were deemed unprofitable or underutilized were the most vulnerable. Many rural areas were disproportionately affected, losing their rail connections entirely. For some communities, this meant reduced access to essential services, increased isolation, and economic challenges. The closures also led to job losses within the railway industry. The closures were often met with resistance, and there were numerous protests, petitions, and campaigns to save threatened lines and stations. Despite these efforts, though, a substantial portion of the proposed closures were implemented, fundamentally altering the geography of Britain's rail network. The Beeching railway cuts had a profound and often negative impact on local communities across Britain. While they aimed to address the financial challenges of the railway system, the closures disrupted lives, harmed local economies, and altered the social and cultural fabric of affected areas. Today, perspectives on the Beeching cuts are diverse and often rooted in individual viewpoints. Some argue that the cuts were essential for the economic efficiency and financial sustainability of the railway system during that era, asserting that the closures helped modernize and streamline a network burdened by unprofitable lines. But to the contrary, others perceive the cuts as a poignant loss of railway heritage, local culture, and community connectivity, emphasizing the enduring economic and social consequences that continue to impact communities today. With environmental sustainability in mind, some viewed the cuts as contributing to increased car usage and pollution, given that the closures lent a greater reliance on road transport, which has its environmental drawbacks. Many acknowledge that the Beeching cuts were made in the context of a changing world, where road transport was gaining prominence. While the closures were undoubtedly controversial, they were seen by some as an attempt to adapt to evolving transportation trends. In response to the loss of heritage and cultural identity caused by the Beeching cuts, various preservation efforts and heritage railways emerged. These initiatives sought to restore closed lines, stations, and vintage trains to their former glory. And heritage railways offered tourists and enthusiasts the chance to experience a slice of Britain's railway history. These projects helped rejuvenate local economies in some areas and rekindle community spirit. They also served as living museums, preserving the heritage of the railway system for future generations. Popular examples include the Bluebell Railway in Sussex and the Severn Valley Railway in Worcestershire, England. The Beeching cuts left a lasting mark on Britain's rail network. In the short term, they achieved some of their goals by reducing operating costs and streamlining operations. However, the long-term consequences were complex and multifaceted. Many communities lost vital rail connections, leading to isolation, economic decline, and reduced access to services. The closures also had cultural and environmental ramifications, contributing to a decline in heritage and an increase in car usage. In the decades following the cuts, preservation efforts and heritage railways emerged as a testament to the enduring impact of the Beeching era. These initiatives aim to revive closed lines and stations, preserving the railway heritage and community spirit that had been lost. The Beeching cuts continue to be a subject of debate and discussion in contemporary Britain. Views on the cuts are often divided, with some emphasizing their economic necessity at the time, and others highlighting the profound social, economic, and cultural costs involved. The debate underscores the enduring legacy of the Beeching era and the complexities surrounding large-scale infrastructure changes. Today, the future of British railways is shaped by a combination of modernization, expansion, and sustainability efforts. Electrification, high-speed rail projects, station improvements, and integrated transport planning are key components of these initiatives. Government policies and investments play a pivotal role in shaping a more efficient, eco-friendly, and connected rail network. In 2017, in a heartwarming tale of dedication, passion, and community spirit, the Swanage Railway, one that had been dormant for 45 years, made a triumphant return to service. It had been a casualty of the Beeching cuts in the 1960s, effectively cutting off the Victorian seaside town of Swanage from the mainline rail network. Enthusiasts and volunteers worked tirelessly for nearly half a century to rebuild and reconnect the line, which stretches from Swanage to Dorset to the main railway network, 10 miles away in Wareham. The first passenger train to depart from Swanage in over 4 decades left the station on a historic timetabled service at precisely 10:23 a.m. The departure marked the commencement of a 2-year trial, during which 4 services a day will operate, reviving the once dormant route. The Swanage Railway, brought back to life by a dedicated army of volunteers, had its humble beginnings with the installation of 5.5 miles of track from Swanage to Norden. This revival resulted in the Swanage Railway, a steam heritage railway that now serves approximately 200,000 passengers every year. However, the dream of fully reintegrating Swanage with the main line required further efforts. Volunteers embarked on the arduous task of restoring and upgrading 3 miles of former network rail track from Walgrid Junction near Wareham to the Heritage Railway line. This endeavour involved a substantial investment of £3.2 million, $3.9 million, which went toward upgrading tracks, constructing a new signal box, installing a level crossing, and improving undergrowth and drainage along the route. For Peter Sills, a passenger on the last British rail train from Swanage to Wareham in 1972, this journey was particularly impressive. He recounted his father's words when he put 14-year-old Peter on the train back then. His father said, "We'll never get to do this journey again." Yet 4.5 decades later, Peter sat with his father Frederick aboard the resurrected service. The journey was met with enthusiasm from locals and railway fanatics alike. Peter Sills acknowledged the importance of passenger support to ensure the sustainability of the railway, urging people to leave their cars behind and opt for the train service. This heartwarming achievement was also noted by a moment of silence to honor the volunteers who dedicated their time and effort to the project but were no longer present to witness its realization. The reopening of the Swanage Railway is more than just the reconnection of a seaside town to the national rail network. It symbolizes the enduring spirit of railway enthusiasts and their unwavering commitment to preserving Britain's railway heritage. While Dr. Beeching's cuts left lasting marks on the country's rail system, this success story demonstrates that with determination and community support, lost railway connections can be revived. And the revival of the Swanage railways has been mirrored across the United Kingdom, as there's been a substantial surge in railway passenger numbers, rekindling the government's attention to the railway sector's role in the UK's transportation network. More and more once closed railway stations have been reopened, and passenger train services have been reinstated on numerous previously decommissioned railway lines in England, Scotland, and Wales. A conservative estimate is that at least 50 railway lines have already been brought back into operation. In various parts of the UK, numerous former railway lines have been resurrected as integral components of the flourishing heritage rail sector, while many thriving community rail partnerships have also emerged. Additionally, disused railway lines have been repurposed as popular cycling and hiking routes. A prime example of the enduring impact of Beeching's decisions can be seen in the former railway line from Bangor to Carnarvon along the North Wales coastline. Today, a substantial portion of this former line serves as a well-frequented cycling path. The former Carnarvon station location also has been repurposed as a supermarket, and the southern section of the line has been redeveloped as part of the highly successful Welsh Highland Railway. The UK government's Restoring Your Railway initiative, launched in 2020, further emphasises the commitment to rejuvenating rail services. With over 30 projects approved for feasibility studies and funding, the future appears promising for UK rail travel.
The USS Growler, SS-215, was a formidable Gatto-class submarine that was mainly used during World War II. Growler specifically refers to a growler. If you're unfamiliar, this is a type of fish that's known for making a low, rumbling sound very similar to a growl. This name aligns with the US naval tradition of picking names that evoke a sense of strength, stealth, and, most of the time, a connection to the ocean. It was the third vessel from the United States Navy to hold this coveted name. The USS Growler would one day become synonymous with bravery and sacrifice thanks to the courageous actions of a man named Commander Howard W. Gilmore, who uttered these legendary words, "Take her down." He said this right before sacrificing himself in order to save the submarine during a surface encounter with an enemy ship, an action that is still remembered fondly to this day. The story of the USS Growler started at the prestigious Electric Boat Company in Groton, Connecticut. The renowned shipyard is known for its expertise in submarine construction. It meticulously laid the keel of the Gatto-class submarine. The construction process was a true testament to America's ingenuity and fierce determination as the nation began preparations to gear up and face the many challenges of World War II. On November 2, 1941, the USS Growler was officially launched into the waters. After additional rigorous sea trials, the submarine was finally commissioned on March 20, 1942. Taking command of the sub was the courageous Lieutenant Commander Howard W. Gilmore, a distinguished officer with a wealthy history of naval experience. The USS Growler's beginnings were not without challenges. Intensive training off the coast of Connecticut revealed a series of mechanical issues that slowed preparation and required lengthy repairs. Finally, the submarine was given the all-clear to leave on her first war patrol. She left Pearl Harbor on June 29, 1942, making her way towards her assigned patrol area near Dutch Harbor, Alaska. 5 days into their patrol, the crew saw what they believed to be 3 Japanese escorts leaving from Kiska. With adrenaline pumping through their veins, they closed in for what would be their first engagement with enemy troops. But first, before we get into that, if you're new here, be sure to subscribe for more incredible stories covering military history and let us know what you'd like to see in the comments down below. To the Growler's surprise, as they got nearer, they realized that the escorts were actually heavily armed destroyers. Despite this obvious danger, the Growler's crew launched several torpedoes, and their precision strikes met their targets. 2 enemy destroyers were badly damaged, and a third was sunk as the Growler somehow managed to slip away without a scratch. The crew didn't have long to savor this first success before they were sent out on patrol duty once again, this time near Taiwan. This patrol proved even more intense and action-packed than the first. Their battles with enemy ships became increasingly common, and the crew was put to the test time and time again. During one fight, they engaged in a submerged night attack on a freighter. With nerves of steel, they shot torpedoes off at the target, just to witness their weapons pass harmlessly under the ship without making contact. Undeterred, the Growler chased after the enemy, but the freighter's quick maneuvering into more shallow waters thwarted their attempts to launch a successful attack. As the patrol continued on, the USS Growler encountered a large fishing fleet on the 25th of August. Spotting a substantial passenger freighter nearby, she fired 3 torpedoes at the ship, but all of them missed. The enemy retaliated with a barrage of powerful depth charges, subjecting the submarine to 3 intense hours of evasion. After the depth charges, the Growler resurfaced and soon spotted a convoy in the distance. Despite trying to catch up with the convoy's main body for over 2 hours, the sub was unable to successfully close in on them. Still, the Growler seized the chance to sink an ex-gunboat, Senyo Maru, during the brief battle. Shifted to the east side of the island, the submarine met face-to-face with the 5,866-ton cargo ship Aifuku Maru on August 31st. Swift and efficient, she launched torpedoes at the target and successfully sank the enemy within 40 minutes of the first sighting. In the next few days, the Growler continued her pursuit of multiple enemy ships. On September 4th, she sank the 10,360-ton supply ship Kashino, disrupting the enemy's supply lines. 3 days later, they struck again, shooting torpedoes at the 2,204-ton cargo ship Taika Maru, which quickly broke in half and sank in a matter of minutes. Top of its form. The engagements with enemy vessels were fierce and exciting, but the crew of the Growler displayed unwavering determination and skill. They proved to be quite the formidable force in the dangerous Pacific waters. The USS Growler faced not only challenges posed by the enemy, but also harsh conditions in the Pacific Ocean. Violent storms and rough seas often tested the crew's strength and the resilience of their vessel. Also, after a particularly long stretch at sea, the submarine experienced mechanical issues and the vessel had to return to Pearl Harbor for repairs. As the USS Growler SS-215 sailed out on her 3rd war patrol in the waters of the Solomon Islands, she realized that she'd been thrust into the heart of the intense Battle of Guadalcanal. At the time, the Solomon Islands had become a hotly contested battleground between the United States and Japan. With enemy planes and ships prowling all over the waters, the crew of the Growler knew they were sailing into the middle of a deadly conflict. Their mission extended beyond sinking enemies. They were now crucial players in gathering intelligence and supporting the effort to gain control of the Solomon Islands, since they were a strategic position for Allied forces. The sub's crew meticulously recorded every observation and interaction with the Japanese, providing the Allies with crucial data to create effective strategies against the enemy's forces. Because of the numbers of bombers in the area and the ever-present threat of attack, the USS Growler was forced to stay low and were unable to engage Japanese surface vessels around the Solomon Islands. After a brief hiatus thanks to a broken crankshaft, the USS Growler continued her war efforts on New Year's Day 1943, setting out on her 4th war patrol off the coast of Rabaul. On January 16th, the submarine met an enemy convoy, and the Growler wasted no time taking action. With precise and accurate torpedo strikes, the sub inflicted serious damage on the lead ship, the 5,857-ton cargo vessel Chifuki Maru. As the torpedoes tore deep into the cargo ship's hull, it tilted heavily before eventually succumbing to the depths, stern first. Success came at a heavy price, though, as the Growler found herself in a haze of depth charges and bombs unleashed by the convoy's destroyers patrolling the area. The vessel managed to escape the situation, thanks to skillful maneuvering. But their luck was about to run out. On February 7th, she encountered a small enemy vessel near the Bismarck Islands. As she prepared her torpedoes for a surface attack, the 900-ton store ship Hayasaki spotted the submarine and immediately reversed its course. It intended to ram straight into the Growler. In the face of danger, Commander Gilmore quickly sprang into action, ordering a full left rudder and sounding the collision alarm. The Growler collided with the enemy at a speed of 17 knots, jolting the American crew violently within the small confines of the submarine. The collision triggered a barrage of machine gun fire from the Hayasaki, resulting in severe casualties on the Growler's bridge. Commander Gilmore was mortally wounded, while 2 others were killed during the fierce confrontation. Realizing the immense danger his presence posed to the submarine and her crew, Commander Gilmore made an extraordinarily brave decision. With legendary resolve, he uttered the now cemented words, "Take her down." Lieutenant Commander Arnold F. Shade, the second in command, followed Gilmore's final order and closed the hatch, guiding Growler to safety under the waves. For his self-sacrifice and courage, Commander Gilmore was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor, becoming the first out of 7 U.S. submarine commanders to be given the nation's highest honor during World War II. After losing their beloved commander, the sub's mission was aborted and the submarine limped back to Australia for repairs to its bow, which took on severe damage. The crew mourned the loss of a remarkable leader while carrying on his legacy of bravery and dedication, as they prepared to face whatever challenges were ahead of them in their continued pursuit of victory. After repairs and a rebuilt bow, the USS Growler received the nickname the Kangaroo Express. This was given thanks to 2 new nickel kangaroos that were used as decorations. The kangaroo symbolized their resilience and spirit, bouncing back from the brink of destruction. The USS Growler continued its patrols after repairs. By now, Lieutenant Commander Arnold F. Shade had taken over command of the submarine, and he eagerly led the crew through their next mission. In mid-June, Shade's careful eyes saw a convoy made up of 8 ships and 3 escorts. The chase started out on the surface, and as the convoy sailed on, Shade sent out an order for 4 torpedoes to be deployed at the lead ship and an accompanying passenger cargo vessel. The precision of the attack was clear, as 2 hits were scored on each target. While the larger ship was immobilized, credit for the sinking was only granted for Miyanoto Maru, the smaller of the 2. Still, this marked Lieutenant Commander Shade's first successful kill as a commanding officer. The submarine's next few patrols were pretty uneventful compared to their illustrious past, except for a couple of intriguing encounters with ocean life. On September 6th, during their 6th patrol, the Growler surfaced and realized her deck was covered with an abundance of bonita fish. Resourceful members of the crew gathered a substantial amount, treating everyone on board to a meal of fresh fish fillets. Earlier on in the patrol, the submarine met a school of blackfish, adding a touch of natural wonder to their long journey. Unfortunately, the 7th patrol was tainted by technical issues, specifically problems with storage batteries and generators, which affected the efficiency of the sub as a whole. After returning to Pearl Harbor, the USS Growler was given orders to head over to California for an extensive overhaul and refitting. Once the necessary repairs and upgrades were carried out, they set out on patrol once again, facing rough seas and violent weather conditions. Nevertheless, the crew's unwavering perseverance paid off when they managed to sink a 250-ton Japanese gunboat patrolling off Aokidajima on April 10, 1944. Next up, the submarine operated in the Marianas Eastern Philippines Luzon area, focusing mainly on conducting sweeps of the Saipan-Tinian island channels in anticipation of the upcoming Battle of Saipan. The patrol involved lifeguard duties, with Growler tasked to rescue any downed airmen in the area of operations during the upcoming invasion. During this time, the Growler joined forces with the USS Bang and the USS Seahorse to form a wolf pack, a strategic maneuver aimed at increasing their offensive capabilities. While steaming through the Balintang Channel on June 28th, the sub's radar detected a contact, and after getting visual confirmation, the commander decided to hold the attack until night, banking on the element of surprise. As the submarine stealthily stalked the convoy, the Growler unleashed a spread of 6 torpedoes, expertly hitting the 1,920-ton Japanese tanker Katori Maru. The impact was critical, creating a towering column of black smoke and flame that reached a staggering height of 700 feet into the air. After this success, the Growler undertook 2 more Wolfpack war patrols and relentlessly attacked multiple Japanese convoys. But it was during her 11th and final patrol that the sub and her crew finally met their fate. The Wolfpack, made up of the Growler, the USS Hake, and the USS Hardhead, spotted an enemy convoy in the vast expanse of the South China Sea. With a strategic approach, the Growler closed in on the enemy, while Hake and Hardhead expertly flanked around from the sides. Under the command of Lieutenant Commander Thomas B. Oakley Jr., the Wolfpack prepared to carry out a coordinated attack. But it was the last communication ever received from the USS Growler. Subsequently, the Hake's war diary noted hearing 2 loud explosions of undetermined character, and shortly after, the convoy changed course away from the Growler's last known position. The Wolfpack carried on with their offensive efforts, with Hake and Hardhead relentlessly engaging the convoy. During the intense battle, the 5,300-ton tanker Mane Maru fell victim to the combined attack of Hake and Hardhead, ultimately sinking under the waves. The price of victory was high, as Hake had to endure a grueling 16 hours of relentless attacks with an astonishing 150 depth charges exploding around her. Despite their efforts to establish contact, Hake and Hardhead received no response from the Growler for 3 agonizing days. As the investigations unfolded, it was determined that the culprits responsible for the sub's tragic demise were the Japanese destroyer Shigure and the escort vessel Chiburi. There also lingered a small chance that one of Growler's torpedoes may have malfunctioned, leading to a premature run, similar to incidents faced by other submarines like the USS Tullabee and the USS Tang. On February 1, 1945, the Navy Department officially declared the USS Growler overdue from her patrol and presumed lost, with the cause of her disappearance remaining shrouded in mystery. The devastating news was given to the next of kin of her valiant officers and crew. Tragically, all 86 crew members, including Lieutenant Commander Oakley, were lost at sea. The tally of the Growler's wartime achievements stood at 15 enemy vessels sunk, totaling an impressive 74,900 tons, along with 7 other vessels damaged, accounting for 34,100 tons across her 11 patrols.
9. Fake Russian submarine. In late 2014 and early 2015, worldwide concerns were raised over what appeared to be a Russian submarine lurking off the Swedish coast. Sweden's Minister of Defense later revealed, after a massive week-long search for the foreign vessels and a major upheaval over whether Sweden could abandon its non-alignment policy and join NATO, that the submarines actually belonged to Sweden and Germany. The bizarre situation was reminiscent of a similar incident that occurred during the 1980s, when alleged Soviet submarines were spotted near Sweden's borders. German screenwriter and film director Dirk Pohlmann admonished journalists for failing to thoroughly investigate the rumors. In his documentary, Deception, The Method of Reagan, Pohlmann argued that the submarines were not of Soviet origins, period, but rather that the suspicious vessels were British and German. The most damning parts of the documentary were censored in Germany. When history appeared to repeat itself in recent years, Pohlmann was naturally one of the first people to call out the possibility that the West was fabricating what he described as the Eastern threat. And as the interview with Sweden's defense minister proved, he was right once again. 8. Ukraine's decoy weapons. Since the dawn of warfare itself, militaries have relied on deception as a way to gain the upper hand against the enemy. This saves precious manpower, weapons, and other resources that are needed to strengthen the war effort elsewhere. The ongoing Russia-Ukraine war is no different. In September 2023, news sources reported that Ukrainian steelworkers are using scrap metal, wood, old tires, discarded boxes, and other materials that they usually throw away or recycle to fabricate phony weapons that are incredibly realistic looking. The dummy howitzers, radar systems, mortar launchers, and other fake weapon systems have proven useful for both distracting the Russians and causing them to waste ammunition by shooting at the replicas. According to news reports, more than 250 mock weapons have been manufactured by workers at Metinvest, Ukraine's biggest steel plant. These decoys have reportedly made a sizable dent in Russia's ammunition supply in certain areas. And they have also proven advantageous when it comes to distracting the enemy. This strategy is also extremely cost-effective, since it involves using scrap materials, decreases the amount of ammunition being used by Ukraine, and costs fewer lives. A chief at the Metinvest steel plant told the press that the fake weapon systems enabled Ukrainian forces to look bigger and stronger than they actually were, at a time when they were vastly outgunned by the Russians. The representative said that the strategy effectively scared off Russian forces, buying the Ukrainians some time to shore up their real manpower and equipment. 7. Quaker guns. During the American Revolution, forces under the command of Continental Army officer Colonel William Washington and British commander Lieutenant Colonel Bannister Tarleton engaged in prolonged, brutal warfare in the rugged wilderness of South Carolina. In October 1780, after nearly a year of fighting, Washington retreated to North Carolina. But dislodging the Loyalists would require either a clever ruse or more manpower and artillery than Washington had at his disposal. It was during this time that he ordered his cavalrymen to build the first ever Quaker gun, a pine log that was disguised to resemble a cannon. Quaker guns were commonly used in American warfare throughout the 18th and 19th centuries. They were popular during the Civil War. Both the Union and the Confederacy used the fake weapons, but the Confederate Army used them more often due to its consistent shortage of artillery. Confederate General Joseph E. Johnston has been remembered throughout history for his noteworthy use of Quaker guns. As his men were withdrawing from Centerville, Virginia in early 1862, he strategically placed Quaker guns around their camp to make it look as though it was still occupied. Southern forces in Mississippi also used the deceptive devices during the Siege of Corinth in May of that year to fool the Union Army while they stealthily moved their supplies, sick and wounded soldiers, and real artillery out of the area by train. Dummy cannons were also used by French commander André Massena, who placed them around city walls during the Siege of Genoa in 1800 as a way to confuse and distract the invading Austrian military. Quaker guns were simple yet life-saving devices. At the very least, they effectively stalled enemy forces and starved off an attack long enough to buy weakened units some time to get out of the danger zone, which is one of the reasons why the tried-and-true, age-old concept of using decoy weapons is still in practice today. 6. Camouflage trees. During World War I, the French, British, and Germans placed fake trees in the forest along their front lines. Camouflage trees were first used in 1915 by the French, who soon passed the idea along to the British, and the Germans caught on to the concept shortly thereafter. In many cases, the fake trees were replicas of real trees near the front line that had been damaged during battle. Engineers photographed and measured the destroyed tree, which was then recreated by artists using wrinkled and painted iron as bark, along with textured materials such as pulverized shells, since after all, a perfectly unharmed tree might look a little out of place. These replicas were extremely detailed and looked exactly like the real trees they were designed after, right down to their broken and intact branches. The process of creating them was time-consuming and complex, and it was carried out in complete secrecy. To avoid being spotted by the enemy, troops removed the real tree and installed the camouflage version under the cover of night. Each false tree was hollow and served as a spy station. They were lined with armored tubes to protect the soldier inside. There was a seat near the top of the trunk for the occupant to perch themselves on, as well as a cleverly disguised mesh viewing hole. The soldier would observe his surroundings through a periscope or telescope and report the details to troops on the ground. 5. The Ghost Army. In early 1944, toward the final stages of World War II, the United States Army established its first ever tactical deception unit. Nicknamed the Ghost Army, it was officially called the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. Created by U.S. Army planners Ralph Ingersoll and Billy Harris, this top-secret unit consisted of 82 officers and 1,023 soldiers, who spent the final year of the war tricking the Germans into believing they were a 30,000-strong force. They accomplished this by using a variety of highly convincing visual, sonic, and radio deception tactics. Armed with only .50 caliber machine guns, these clever combat con artists carried out 22 large-scale deceptions against the Nazis. Due to the sophisticated nature of their missions, most of the Ghost Army's members had backgrounds in art or engineering, or were highly trained professional soldiers with advanced skills. With an average IQ of 119, they were one of the most intelligent military groups of all time. The Ghost Army's tactics included using inflatable tanks, jeeps, trucks, aircraft, and other vehicles that looked real, fake radio traffic and sound effects, and deploying bogus generals who passed as legit military officials. These methods worked incredibly well, effectively saving thousands of lives while driving the Germans crazy with false leads. Their work was highly classified even after the war ended. Members of the Ghost Army were sworn to secrecy, and for decades, the military went to great lengths to conceal any sign of the unit. Its existence was finally revealed to the public in 1985, courtesy of a Smithsonian Magazine expose, and the matter was officially declassified in 1996, more than 50 years after the war's end. When the Ghost Army's existence was finally no longer a secret, former members became more comfortable with the idea of openly discussing their service. During an interview with Princeton Alumni Weekly's Rick Bayer, U.S. military veteran Freddie Fox described the Ghost Army as a traveling roadshow that went up and down the front lines impersonating the real fighting outfits. 4. Razzle-dazzle camouflage. Starting in the early 1900s, during World War I, the British began painting some of their warships in psychedelic, brightly colored patterns. Known as razzle-dazzle camouflage, it wasn't meant to hide targets, but to make them visually confusing to the enemy. In addition to featuring wild colors, razzle-dazzle consisted of contrasting lines and shapes going in various directions. This made it difficult for an enemy to figure out important details such as the type of vessel, its size, or how fast it was going, and in what direction. Each razzle-dazzle ship had a unique pattern and color scheme. One featured red, gray, black, and white angular shapes. Another had a curvy blue, black, and white design. There was also a zebra print ship and one that was painted like a brick wall. Although the British started the razzle-dazzle trend, the Americans also used it. In 1904, the U.S. Navy launched the USS Nebraska, which had a contrasting chevron pattern on its hull and smokestacks. A dozen Navy warships were eventually covered in crazy patterns and colors. Razzle-dazzle reached its peak popularity during World War I, especially among the British Royal Navy. One newspaper reporter described the radically patterned warships as a flock of sea-going Easter eggs, while another referred to them as floating cubist paintings. Only a handful of these eye-popping ships survive today. 3. A ship disguised as an island. On February 27, 1942, the Allied naval fleet was defeated by the Japanese Imperial Navy in the Battle of the Java Sea. In the days following the crushing battle, the Japanese sank 3 of the 4 remaining Dutch ships in the Java Sea. The slow-moving, 184-foot-long, 25.6 meters minesweeper Kreinsen was the last remaining ship. It was lightly armored and therefore ill-equipped for battle, and floating in plain view of any Japanese aircraft or naval vessels that might pass by. The Kreinsen's best chance of survival was to flee from Japanese-occupied waters and toward Australia, except there was no way it could outrun a Japanese vessel. To sneak past the Japanese undetected, the crew of the Kreinsen came up with the unconventional idea of disguising the vessel as an island. The area contained over 1,800 small islands, and the ship was big enough to pass off as a small island, so the idea wasn't as far-fetched as it seemed. The 45-man crew stopped the ship at a nearby island, cut down as much vegetation as possible, and covered the vessel's entire surface area with foliage. They arranged the plants in a way that mimicked jungle vegetation and painted any exposed metal in shades of gray to resemble rock formations. The ruse was surprisingly convincing, especially from a distance. Since islands don't move, however, the ship had to be careful nonetheless. During the day, it anchored close to actual islands and remained stationary. At nighttime, Kreinsen painstakingly crept toward Australian waters, finally reaching safety after 8 days as the only Dutch vessel of its class to escape the hostile zone of the Java Sea. 2. Dummy tanks during the World Wars. Dummy tanks are what they sound like, fake tanks that look real. The earliest examples were used during World War I by Allied forces, who built mock versions of British heavy tanks out of wood. Because their tracks were non-functional, the fake tanks were sometimes fitted with a hidden set of wheels and towed from place to place by horses. The Germans also built fake tanks, many of which were made to resemble Allied models, but it's unclear whether they were used as dummy weapons or for training. During World War II, both the Allied and Axis powers used mock tanks. The British are primarily credited with pioneering their use as a form of military deception. Dubbed spoofs, the dummy tanks of this era first saw large-scale use during the North African Campaign in 1941. Between April and June of that year, the Royal Engineers built an average of 2 spoofs per day. Many of the mock tanks were mounted on jeep and truck frames, so they could be easily deployed. The Allies also used inflatable tanks, which were favored on the battlefield despite their tendency to be destroyed easily by enemy fire. Dummy tanks and amphibious landing craft were most famously used in the Allied invasion of Normandy, better known as D-Day. In addition to fake tanks, the Allies used dummy planes, ships, and even fake soldiers. The main purpose of these dummy vehicles was to make the Nazis think that the Allies had more of them than they actually did, and to distract the Germans by making it look like the Allies were about to invade a different location. In addition to using decoys in Western Europe, fake tanks were deployed in Eastern Europe, courtesy of the Red Army. Much like militaries elsewhere, their main goals were to increase their perceived tank numbers and distract the enemy from the movement of their real equipment. The Japanese military also used dummy tanks during World War II. During the Battle of Iwo Jima, one such decoy was surrounded by American forces, only for the soldiers to discover that it was a fake carved out of volcanic ash. 1. Modern dummy tanks. Inflatable dummy tanks have worked so well throughout history as a deceptive warfare tactic that they're still in production and use today. According to some news sources, a Czech manufacturer that produces inflatable tanks and weapons is willing to send its products to Ukraine to aid in the fight against the invading Russian military. While it's unclear whether any of the products are currently in use by Ukrainian forces, Inflatech chief executive Wojtek Frezer told the National News in early 2023 that he would be willing to send inflatable decoys to an ally country that needed them. The company was founded in 2015 and currently makes 30 different types of mock weapons, including replicas of the American-built M1 Abrams tank, as well as a multiple rocket launcher known as the High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, or HIMARS. 6 months after Frezer's interview with the news outlet, drone footage that was captured in Kiev appeared to show 3 inflatable replicas of Russian T-72 tanks operating in close proximity to one another. Russia has been known to use decoy tanks since long before the ongoing conflict, so it wouldn't be surprising if the country's military is currently using dummy weapons. Most recently, Russian forces were accused of using decoy tanks in the Zaporizhia region. For now, the war rages on. And while the dummy tanks are clearly a tried-and-true tactic being employed by both the Russian and Ukrainian militaries, it won't be enough on its own for either side to win the war. The outcome remains to be seen. Thanks for watching. Which one of these fake weapons do you fear the most? Let us know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.